David Trim, he's the director of the Adventist Archive Statistics and Research. He put it like this, bro. The data is clear. The remnant is an endangered species. Hey, everybody. It's Pastor Marcus. Welcome back to the Story Church Project, the Story Church Podcast, the Story Church YouTube channel, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you're tuning in. It's super awesome to be here with you guys again. Mario, we've been on break for a little bit over a month. How have you been, man? I actually haven't really seen you in that time. Tell us what's happening in Mario Land.
Oh, bro, I miss it, man. Mario Land, I miss it. Actually, I've actually been playing Switch with my son, bro. Mario World. Now that you say it, but anyway, yeah, man, it's been good. God is good, blessed. Obviously, we're busy, but you know, we're feeling pumped for season 2, man. I actually missed this. It's a good thing we're back, bro.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We've been pumped from season 2, from the final episode of the last season, where we did like a little bit of the primer. Like, we're gonna talk about youth ministry, we're gonna talk about young people, we're gonna talk about youth retention, and yeah, super pumped. And by the way, you guys, as you're tuning in to listen to this, there is a brand new free ebook that you can download from the storychurchproject.com. So just go to the storychurchproject.com, click on freebie in the toolbar, or click on start here on the main header, and it'll take you to this link where you can download this brand new ebook, which is titled, I'll tell you what in a second, is titled, Why Are Young People Still Leaving Church? And the word still is the operative word there, bro, because it's like, you know, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I grew up in church. And when I was a kid, I remember pastors coming to our church to talk about this. Right. I remember the conversations. I remember the conference leaders and the youth directors and the Pathfinder directors asking this question. And now I'm almost 40 and we still asking the question.
My goodness.
So it's not why are young people leaving, it's why are they still leaving, bro? Like how many times do we have to have the conversation before we get somewhere? What do you think?
Yeah, man, it's been an ongoing conversation. I think if we ask a lot of us who, you know, are, I would say are still, you know, obviously part of the church, most of our friends, man, they're gone. They're just not part of it. It's really the story of everybody. We're here by grace, if anything, and it hurts us, man. Obviously, it hurts us. We, you know, we're pastors. Obviously, we want to find out. And now that, you know, at a moment that we're pastoring, we're also figuring this thing out. Like, man, dude, it's not as easy, right? But yeah, man, it's a super important topic, because I think we're not just gonna go, and you'll talk a little bit about this, but we're not just gonna look at like the superficial things of it, right? And this is a hard conversation, not only because of the hard problem, but because of the deeper issues that maybe we need to address and continue to talk about, because we're not gonna be the first ones talking about them, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. And look, man, the deeper issues, we're gonna get there. We're not gonna look at that today, but we're gonna get there. Yeah. And if you get this free ebook, you'll get to jump ahead and you'll get to read everything that we're gonna explore and discuss. So make sure you get the free ebook. But those deeper issues, bro, they are the things that it really blows my mind. They are the things that we don't like to talk about, you know. But they are where the issue lies, in my estimation. Yes. We may not like to talk about it. It may not be very comfortable, but that's where we have to go. That's where the conversation needs to happen. But we're not going to go there today. I think today, what I wanted to start with, there's a quote, maybe you've heard it before, that the job of a leader is to define reality first. You got to start there. You have to define reality. And so that's what I think this introductory episode is going to be about, is defining reality. What are we talking about? Right? What do we mean young people are leaving church? What do we mean young people are still leaving church? Is that bad? You know, is this just a burnt out conversation that we've had too many times? Is it even relevant anymore? So I want to define sort of the landscape that we're navigating here, so that we can then go forward and say, all right, what are we actually addressing? I don't know. What do you think? That's how it makes sense in my brain anyway.
Yeah. Craig Rochelle said once, bro, that in order for us to know how to get to our destination, we need to know first where we're at, right? Just like a GPS,
Mm.
right? The GPS needs to say your current location. And a lot of times we like getting ahead of ourselves. We see a program or we hear about some new thing and we're like, we got to do that. We got to do that. And people jump on the trend and they try to get there. But then it ends up not working. We've been doing this for years, like you said. And why is that? Well, the first thing is defining exactly where we're at. What is exactly the issue so that we can figure out how to get, to where God wants to lead us. But knowing where we're at is important. And yeah, man, this is a good first step. So I say we go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me start with this question, bro. And I know you hinted at this already. What has been your experience, personal experience with young people, friends of yours, peers of yours, or even now as a pastor in the churches that you've been involved in with young people disconnecting and disengaging from church? I guess I'm asking, like, how close has it hit home for you in your own experience?
Yeah, man. Obviously, it definitely has hit home in the sense, friends I grew up with, um, people that I went to Pathfinders with, or you know, just did church with my age. Bro, most of them are just like not in church anymore. Of course, there's a lot of elements there. I moved in the middle of high school, but nonetheless, I know because even though I lost contact with some of them I didn't. Um, Made new friends, and those new friends that I made also probably like half of those are in the church now. So it's just the same story from one geographical place to another. The story kind of repeated, and then I was able to get
Mm.
in contact with some of those other friends back. I grew up in the Bay Area, and same, bro. They were just out, disconnected. Uh, they weren't in church, but it was cool to connect with them because like that relationship part was still there. Those memories, those core memories were still there, but they were just definitely, not attending consistently. They had their own children now. They were parents, and yet they weren't engaged or connected to the church at all anymore. So I didn't grow up in a huge church, so it was a small group, but I could tell you maybe at least 10 or 15 young people who I know are out, and some friends
Mm.
who I have now who we connect, like we still connect, we're still good friends, but they've disconnected from church,
Mm.
and I still continue that friendship. I don't know if that's the case. I think that's a lot of case for a lot of us, right? We're still friends with a lot of these guys, but when it comes to church stuff, they're just like, yeah, they'll go to events here and there, depending on the event. If it's a soccer game or something, maybe they'll come up. But when it comes to being a committed disciple, it's not, bro. But the friendship
Mm.
still stands, and maybe that speaks to other things we could talk about later on. But I think that's it, bro. I mean, in general terms, with the time we have, obviously, that's what it comes down to, man.
Yeah, that's it, bro. And there's a couple of things that you said there. And I relate, by the way, because the church that I grew up in, we had so many young people. And it's not like I've stayed in touch with every single one of them, but
Hmm.
I was close to quite a lot of them. And over the years, there was just a huge, massive, massive drop off in terms of faith engagement, in terms of church engagement. Massive drop off where, at one point I could count like with one hand how many of us were still in church, and there were
Mm-hmm.
almost 100 of us, like a lot of young people.
Man,
Like, these are Latino families, bro. They don't never stop
yeah,
having babies, so there was so many of
yeah,
us.
I feel you.
But at one point I was like, yeah, there's like this many, like I could actually count it. um and I think there's two things that I want to say here before we dive in, because what I want to do is I want to read some quotes about
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
youth ministry is at today, and we'll just react to it. But there was a time where young people would leave church and then come back when they had a family, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so there was almost an expectation of, oh yeah, they're at that age where they leave, just wait till they have kids, they'll come back. um Now, I don't know if that's necessarily still the case in pre-modern cultures, but in secular Western cultures, that is no longer the case. We are
Hmm.
no longer
Hmm.
seeing young people leave church and come back when they have a family. We're seeing them leave, never to return.
Hmm.
And the second thing that I think is important to recognize, which is a very actually confronting reality, is that it's no longer true that the young people who leave church leave because they want nothing to do with God.
Mm-hmm.
I personally know a large number of young people who have left church because they want to follow Jesus more.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, right? They leave church because they want to be closer to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's confronting. That's really confronting. Now, somebody might say, well, how's that possible? You know, you can't leave the church and follow Jesus, and you get into all these theological debates. I'm not trying to get into the debate. I'm just telling you what I'm observing. There
Mm-hmm.
is now a higher likelihood that young people who are leaving aren't leaving because they want to go clubbing and get drunk, and they're not leaving because they want to go be worldly. That's not always
Mm-hmm.
the case. I'm seeing a lot more young people who leave because they're like, dude, I want to be closer to God, and I can't do it here. And
Mm.
so that has us confront the issues of toxicity in the local church, and the issues of like, hey, we're supposed to be the place where you can walk closer with God, but we're actually the obstacle. We're actually the thing that's getting in the way.
Hmm.
And so that's something for us that we can discuss in the next few episodes as well. But I just wanted to share those things because I feel like whenever we talk about youth retention, there's so many outdated ideas that are still floating around. Like
Mm.
young people leave and come back when they have kids, or young people leave just because they want to go sin. Those are
Mm-hmm.
myths. They're not true. They might be
Yeah.
true sometimes, but they're
Yeah.
not true all the time. And so maybe putting some of those myths aside and recognizing actually a lot of young people leave because they want to follow Jesus more, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
young people leave never to return. They're not coming
Mm.
back when they have kids, and so you got to get rid of some of those outdated ideas, and recognize like there's a little bit more complex than than we might give it credit for. So I don't know, like
Yeah.
have you observed any of that in your own experience?
Yeah, man. Actually, pastoring, I remember I was part of a board meeting, and we were asking this. We were talking about this question, right?
Mm,
It was a group of young people that were leaving. I was actually youth pastor in that day, and there was other young people, maybe like second generation, brothers who come over here who are young, but they come with a different culture, and they were saying things like, well, I'm still in church, I'm still being faithful to God. If they're leaving, it's because they love the world more than God.
mm,
And man, those were frustrating board meetings for me because we had a whole bunch of parents in those days who had little children, and they were all the part of the board. They're like, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm teaching my child to be. I'm teaching my children. I'm teaching my children. Years later, some of those children unfortunately aren't in church anymore. and
mm.
and so obviously that attitude or whatever was happening then didn't work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, to be fair, there is some that stayed, right? Of course, there's some that stayed, but I'm talking the majority, and I'm
Mm,
speaking the majority left of those
yeah.
parents who were on board with that type of mentality. So yeah, man, unfortunately, this is something we do need to address because it's where are we at as a church? What are these myths that we're believing? If we believe that, then that's how we're going to address the problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And if that's how we're addressing the problem, then we're not going to get anywhere.
That's right. That's right, man. It takes a lot of humility, to sit back and be like, you know what? I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why youth are leaving, and I'm not going to assume that I know.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of humility, and I've one of the things I found is that effective missional work begins with listening,
Mm.
and it thrives in listening, and it concludes in listening. It's all about
Mm-hmm.
listening. And so I think it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we do listen, and that there'll always be people who are like, oh, I don't want to listen. I have my opinion, and I think I'm right, and that's the end of it. And hey, you know what? Fair enough. Have fun. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for
Yeah.
me, one of the things I want to do more and more is just listen deeply to what the experiences of young people are, and it's very complex. There's lots going on, but with all the complexity, we can look at some of the stats that we're seeing coming through, and wrestle with the reality that's before us. Because when we talk about young people leaving today, I'm not sure very many of us. I'm not sure very many of us get how bad it is.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like most
Yeah.
people are like, yeah, young people, yeah, they're always leaving church. Yeah, it's a thing. It's like I don't think you realize I don't think you realize how bad it is, man. Like,
No.
like, you know, it's not just, oh yeah, yeah, I wish we could fix that. Like, no, like this is, you know, if you have a perforated artery and it's just bleeding, if you don't stop it, you're gonna die, right? Like you don't just let an artery bleed. Like, oh yeah, I get scratched all the time. Like, nah, dude, this is an artery. You know,
Yeah.
like this is life or
Yeah.
death. And that's what we're seeing right now with youth retention. It's like it's a perforated artery. And so much so that one of the things I'll share a little bit later, I'm looking at some of the statistics. There, you know, some of the stats and latest research is not saying that we are simply losing young people, but that the church is at risk right now of losing an entire generation.
Mm.
Right, that's an entire generation of young people who disconnect. And if an entire generation of young people disconnects, then that means the only people still in the church are the older generations. And when they're gone, who's there to carry the torch? Ain't nobody left.
Mm.
Right. I was talking to a pastor. I won't say who and I won't say where. He's in Europe. He's pastoring in one of the countries in Europe. And
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
told me that in this country in Europe, it's a very secular Western country, the Adventist church is literally 2 generations away from going extinct,
Yikes, man. Yikes.
you know? And it's like, yeah, this is a little bit more serious than than we give it credit for. So yeah, bro, I thought what I would do is just read some of these stats and share them with you, get your reaction. We could just, you know, banter back and forth about them. And then in the next episode, we'll start looking at why is this happening? Let's dig deep and see what solutions and insights we can learn. But yeah, bro, I don't know if you're keen. I'm ready. I got some quotes here in front of me, so I'm ready to go.
Go for it, bro. Go for it. Actually we got one stat that I think at the end is also gonna help out because this we think of young people, right? And we're like, oh, it's just young people leaving. Like you said, some people are like, well, you know, we'll figure it out. Um, this has affected the leadership of the church. It
Mm,
goes so deep that there's an issue. Even it's affected even with the amount of pastors
yeah,
that are needed. And I don't know if you probably have that stat too, but let's go for it, bro. Let's start.
I don't have that specific stat, but I do know. We'll poke at that one a little bit more later on. I do know that there is at least from conversations I've had with other pastors and administrators, there seems to be a bit of a crisis right now in terms of there's not enough young pastors coming through, or young people wanting to pastor. So there's issues there. Yeah, we'll get to that, man. So let me start with this one: youth ministry. This is from The Failure of Youth Ministry by Greg Stier. He's a youth ministry kind of like guru. It's sort of his thing. He's always talking about it and researching it. And he wrote this in his book, The Failure of Youth Ministry. Youth ministry has a blown engine. We're not talking a flat tire, a broken windshield wiper, or a busted headlight. We're talking the core of youth ministry has seized up like an engine with a thrown rod. More than 60% of young people raised in the church leave it in adulthood. And I think what he's capturing there is kind of what I was trying to say, right? That we're not talking about like, you know, your car, you got a flat tire, you got a busted headlight, you could still move, you could still get somewhere, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But when you throw a rod in your motor, like that thing, you ain't starting it, you know, like it's
Hmm.
it's not functioning.
Hmm.
Um, and that's what he's saying. Like, this is what we're seeing in all the data right now is that youth ministry, this is the place that we're at. The engine's blown, bro. 60% of young people raised in church leave it. And if you think about it, that equates to a 40% success rate. That's what that equates to. Now I know because I've been in church long enough, and I know church people. I know how church people think, man. We got some weird mentalities, and I know there's somebody listening who's like, "Oh, 40% success. Praise
Yeah.
Jesus for that 40%. We should be celebrating." Like I know there's somebody out there thinking
It's
that.
the remnant. It's
So
the
I want to
remnant.
impress you. I want to go straight for the jugular here. If your business had 40% success in the market, you would start a new business. If your airline pilot had a 40% safe landing rate, you would get off that plane and find a new pilot. If your doctor had a 40% success rate, you would get a new doctor.
Hmm.
And when we say youth ministry has a 40% success rate, all of a sudden you want to flip the script and be like, oh, thank Jesus for the 40%. Let's be positive. No, there's nothing positive here. It's horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. I'm in the business world now. As you guys know, I'm not an employed pastor anymore. So I have my own business and I work with businesses. There is not a single business on the planet that will keep doing something that has a 40% success rate year after year. And yet we've been doing the same thing for over 30 years in youth ministry, and the success rate has never improved. It's stuck at 40%. That's tragic, man. That's tragic. Like, it's almost criminal that we just keep, oh, let's do that again. You know, it's like, dude, 40% success rate. That's shockers, bro. What do you think, man? Give me your reaction.
Bro, one I know we live in the world, right? And I know people do say, I've heard it, bro. I know you've heard it. People say that, right? Oh, it's the remnant, because of maybe us not understanding the remnant theology. We're always going to be, you know, small numbers, and we use that theology or that misinterpretation of the remnant theology to justify our mediocrity, to justify that we're doing okay. So we'll do things how God doesn't tell us to do them, and we'll still stamp it with His approval just so that we calm our conscience down, right? And we'll continue moving. So we've developed a theology that has to justify those type of numbers, that has to justify those type of things, and we say, all right, let's keep moving. And we've even got verses like, you know, when we present a child, the verses that say, what is it, Proverbs 22:6, that says, train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And I've heard a lot of Hispanic people, bro, that say, they use this verse to say the child will leave the church, but this is the promise that he'll come back. And I'm like, that's not what it's saying, though. It's saying that when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so we read these statistics and we say, and we use these verses to say, hey, 40%, don't worry. God said in Proverbs 22:6 that the other 60% will come back. But no, that's not what it's saying. It's literally saying that your convert rate should be 100% if you train the child right. It should be 100%, not 40%. It says he will not depart from it. It means that when he's older, there's no point in time where he says, I'm going to leave and then come back. It says that when he's older, he says, I'm going to continue doing what my parents taught me to do. So this 40% rate, bro, speaks against what even God's word is saying.
Absolutely, bro. 100%, man. And you're right, because like I heard that verse mentioned all the time, people justifying mediocrity, as you said, by quoting these Bible verses. And the other thing to recognize here as well is that when we quote the text that way, we're showing our biblical illiteracy, right? A proverb is wisdom literature, Jewish wisdom literature. Jewish wisdom literature is not about guarantees. It's about probabilities. So what the proverb is saying is, if you train up a child in the way he should go, there's a likelihood that as he ages, he's going to keep walking in that path. And by the way, that goes both ways, right? If you train a child to be self-centered and selfish, you solidify that in his character, and even when he's older, he's going to keep walking down that. It's solid in his character. If you train him in the way of Jesus, that's going to be solid in his character. But it's wisdom literature. Remember, it's not about guarantees. It's a likelihood. And you're so right in saying, like, if we really took this seriously, then what that would mean is we should see a higher likelihood of success, not failure, right? Not failure. Not that the text is giving guarantees, but we can't just look at a 40% success rate and say, oh, but the Bible says they'll come back. Like, no, that's not what he's saying. And by the way, that's not what reality is saying either. Like I said earlier, the stats have shown us repeatedly that young people are leaving and they're not coming back. They're getting older. They're hitting 40, 50, 60, right? Generation X, millennials now pushing 40. I'm almost 40, bro. They're not coming back. And if they do come back, which I hope to God that everyone
Yeah.
has an encounter with Jesus and a return to a relationship with Jesus. But how tragic is it that if they do come back, they come back when they're past their age of influence, they're past their age of creativity, they're past their best years, you know? And so it's like something's got to give, man. We have to get honest with ourselves and say, like, dude, a 40% success rate is nothing to celebrate. And by the way, let's put it this way. When we say 40% success rate, there's only one way that that's measured. The 40% success rate is measured by how many young people are still sitting on a pew on a Sabbath morning.
Mm.
It's not
Yikes.
measured by how many young people are using their gifts to build the kingdom of God. It's not measured by how many young people are becoming disciples who make disciples. It's not measured by how many young people are actively serving their communities and lifting Jesus up. It's measured by how many young people have their butts on a chair on Saturday morning. That's what our 40% success rate is measured by. And in my opinion, if you measure it by the other stuff, active discipleship, active missional engagement, I wouldn't be surprised if the success rate is less than 10%. You know? So something's got to give here, man. Like, it's rough. It's rough, man. Here's another one. This is from the Hope Baptist pastor, Scott Brown. He refers to modern youth ministry as a 50-year failed experiment. And Paul Lewis, he's a life coach, I believe. He calls it the $6 billion fail. And this is what he says. Protestants and Catholics spend almost $6 billion every year in America on youth ministries and youth outreach. Yet over 90% of the 13-year-olds in our churches will be gone from any connection with faith by the age of 21. Like I said, bro, what happened last year when Facebook changed to Meta and they pivoted to build the metaverse? Right? Was that last year or the year before? Things happen so quick, right? That year was horrible for Facebook. Like, they lost so much money trying to build this metaverse and these goggles, and it just wasn't working. Within a year, what happened the very next year? Mark Zuckerberg came out and said, this year, we're switching gears, year of efficiency, we're jumping into artificial intelligence, and the metaverse took a back burner. All it took was 1 year of low percentage of failure for these guys to say, nah, we're switching gears. Now, he hasn't given up on the metaverse, but he's focusing on AI and efficiency. And his wealth skyrocketed, man. And it's like, we, for 50 years, have been spending $6 billion every year on youth ministry collectively as different, denominations, with this horrible success rate. And guess what, bro? Next year, we're just going to do it again. We're just going to do it again. More money. More rallies, more international speakers, more this, more that, more. It's just like, it doesn't, like, something is missing here, that we're spending this much money and this much energy and this much time, and we're not making a dent on the issue. Like I think when I was a kid, like, youth ministry was mad cringe when I was a kid, bro. Like, the songs were cringy. Like, we had some cool speakers. There's always, like, cool, genuine people that you can connect with. And we had some of those. But, like, for the most part, everything was so cringe about it. Like, youth ministry was becoming, like, this sort of cool thing. But it was really bad back then. Like, you listen to, like, the Christian hip hop back then, or, like, the bands. It was just, like, so bad, bro. Like, you fast forward to today and the quality is, like, wow, like, next level, so good. And it hasn't made a difference. That artery is just pouring out, bro. Youth like crazy. It hasn't made a difference. So yeah, man. Something's got to give. We're missing something in this conversation. That's what I think.
Man, bro, I'm gonna say it because we're having this hard conversation. But
say it, bro. Say it.
Yeah, people at my church know, bro. They know at my church, and my elders know, and they know I love young people. But for example, how much money do we spend in our Pathfinder programs? How much money do we spend in my adventures? And I'm saying this as having a little one. My son just started adventures this past Sabbath, which was amazing. It was great. My wife was sending me pictures. It's good and all. But having worked as a pastor, looking at the thousands and millions that are spent on these type of programs, just to see the kids graduate, and then literally most of them, yeah, because there's few here and there, but most of them don't want anything else to do after they graduate with anything that has to do with Pathfinders. And if they do, it's because at home they're like forced to do it, right? Even still in their high school age, some houses are a little bit, they have the stronger discipline. So they're like, if you live here at home, you still have to do, master guides, or you still have to continue doing this. But once they get to decide for themselves, they're out. And yet we continue to move forward. And if you change some of these things, it's like a slight change. It's we keep going back to programming, and we'll talk about obviously this later. But the point is, bro, it's just thousands and thousands, not only of dollars, but it's resources in general, volunteer time, energy, time going into things where we do it to calm our conscience down, to say, well, we're doing something. Now, if they chose to go out on their own, that's on them. At least I did my part. Again, goes back to justifying our mediocrity, just because we want to calm our conscience down. And it's the same thing, bro, in our church. Now, you were reading about, the evangelical and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure we're involved in that, because how much do we spend on these types of programs?
Yeah.
Where we think it's working, and we're literally seeing the convert rate. Like, we're literally seeing how many of them are graduating from, let's say, the Pathfinder program, and then not coming back to it. And we still continue to do the same thing later on. Now, I'm not advocating to getting rid of Pathfinders. I'm just saying that there needs to be like a complete redirection of something, because it's like you said, 40% convert rate. Yeah, let's keep doing it. 40% is 40%.
Yeah.
Nah. Yeah.
Nah. I feel you, bro. I feel you. And that's exactly how I feel about it, because you look at this and you're like, every year we just repeat the same cycle. Maybe we pump more money into it, and maybe we think the solution is we just got to do it a little bit better, but we have been doing it better. We've gotten better and better at it over the last few decades, and nothing's changing. There's something underneath all of this, something that we're missing. And that's what I want to talk about in the future episodes, right? There's something underneath the soil. We keep plucking the branches and pulling the fruit, but there's something underneath in the roots where we can't see that is rotten. There's something down there that's just not right. And unless we get a glimpse of what that is and we start healing that, we're just going to keep having the same fruit coming out on the tree, So, and like some people might say, oh, but like that's, these statistics, Marcus, that's Protestants and evangelicals and Catholics. And, us Adventists, like, we've got Pathfinders and adventurers, and we've got our academies and our high schools, all these wonderful things. So it must be better for us. Right. But the statistics within the Adventist church show us that our youth retention is no different to the broader evangelical world, whether it's Pentecostals or Calvinists or Catholics, not evangelical, but obviously Catholic. Like, our youth retention is just as bad as theirs is no different. So I'm going to read to you just a couple of stats on this. So this is from the Archive, Statistics and Research Department of the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And it reports, and this was in a 2024 Ministry Magazine article titled Young Adults, Their Future, Our Future. And it says that the Archive, Statistics and Research Department of the GC reports a staggering 50 to 70% disengagement rate of post-high school individuals in the global north. 50 to 70% disengagement. If you look at that statistic and you're like, well, what is the medium? The medium is 60%. 60% failure. Right? Exact identical to the evangelical and Catholic world, like 60% failure. And so our SDA youth leave our church at the same rate, 60%, which means our youth ministry success is about the same as everybody else, a tragic 40%. No different, despite all of our programs, all of our resources, like you were just brilliantly saying, right? we find ourselves with the same youth exodus emergency. And so at some point, we got to sit back and be like, dude, something ain't right, you know. Like I'll never forget, like years ago, I was still a teenager. I went to this beach. I worked at this place, and they took us, you know, to the beach one day as I don't know, it was like a thank you thing for all the employees. And most of us were teenagers who worked at this place. And we went to this beach, and there were no waves. It was just like super still. And there was this guy who was like the clown of the office. And he walks up to the beach, and he turns around, he's like, I'm not a genius, but isn't a beach supposed to have waves? You know, like, and I think of that, like, you know, I'm not a genius either. I don't have a PhD in youth ministry. I don't, you know, spend every waking moment of the day reading every single paper that's out there. But not being a genius, I'm pretty sure 40% ain't healthy. I'm pretty sure we shouldn't settle for that, you know, and just be like, hey, that's fine. And I just want to close this little thought with this, because David Trim, who is the director of the Archive, Statistics and Research Department of the General Conference, he said this in an article that he wrote in 2022 in the Adventist Review. Is titled, Why Do They Walk Away? The Heart Cry of Adventist Parents. And this is what he wrote. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is losing its young people. This is true virtually everywhere, though it's particularly true in the global north of economically advanced secular countries with postmodern or post-religious cultures. But it's a fact everywhere. Our children are leaving our faith. Now, he goes on to add 62.5% of those who left the SDA church stated that they were young adults when they ceased being a church member. That's that 60% failure rate again. And then he concludes with this, bro, and this is painful. The data is clear. The remnant is an endangered species.
Yikes.
That's hard to swallow, man. That's hard to swallow. And you make that up, you guys. You know, don't come throwing stones at me. Like, go after David Trim. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
David Trim alone. He's doing good stuff. But what do you think about that, bro? Like, you know, when you have someone whose whole life is like, I look at the statistics and the archives and the research, and it's like, yo, the remnant. He's talking about the Adventist church. He's like, we're an endangered species.
Bro,
what do you do with that?
We have sometimes the Israel mentality, right? We're chosen, so God will work things out. We're chosen, so we can do whatever the heck we want in whatever way we want, in the ways we think God wants them to do it. And then, because you'll get things, you'll hear this type of stuff, and you'll say, and I've done this before, bro. Like, oh, it's God's church, He'll take care of it. You know, in the end, it's God's church. You know, it's His remnant, this and that. But we keep forgetting, bro, that in the end times, especially as Adventists, we need to look at, like, I don't know when we stopped paying attention to this data and just said we don't care about it, when literally it's in our DNA, in the 7 letters in Revelation of the churches, where God is calling them to evaluate. Like, the letters are there for them to evaluate. And even in Revelation, they are running the risk, like the church of Ephesus, of being removed from being a church. Even Laodicea, right, is on a very shaky ground of being vomited by God Himself. So just because we're a church, or we consider ourselves the church, or however you want to see it, we feel that we look at these stats, we see our youth bleeding, and we still like, oh, you know what? God will take care of it, or it's the remnant. This is how it works. It's like, wait a minute. God is calling us to something. He's calling to evaluate these deep issues, just like He did in the Revelation churches, where He tells them, hey, you know what? You're doing good here, because, bro, we're not dissing the church, saying that everything is horrible. Even Jesus Himself said to Ephesus, you're doing good here. Like, man, you're really good here. But guess what? That's not good enough for you to keep your status as a church as good as it is. I'm removing it because you're missing the love there, your first love and the first deeds. So when you read this stuff, bro, we need to really, with prayer and led by the Holy Spirit, see, like, man, we need to change something. Something really needs to be addressed, and God is calling us to do that now. That's just from a theological perspective.
Yeah. I love it, bro. I love it. And I would say this: do not wait for the GC or for the NAD or whatever your union or conference is. Do not wait for them to do something. These guys
Bro,
are
preach.
inundated. They are inundated. They are snowed under in a blizzard of administrative stuff. If you wait for the GC or the NAD or even your local conference to be the ones who lead change, it'll never happen. And that's no criticism to them. That's just they got too much going on. It's up to us, man. It's up to us, the people. It's up to us, the local church, to look at this stuff and say, we're going to chart a new course and we're going to try
Yes.
something different for the next generation. And we may not see the results of that in our lifetime. We may see some early results of it, but it's the future generations that will look back and say, man, we're so glad that this shift was made here in this local church and here in that local church. In fact, one of the things we'll talk about in a future episode is a project that ran a few years ago with Fuller Youth Institute called Growing Young. And what
Mm-hmm.
Growing Young did was, instead of asking the question, why are young people leaving church? They asked the question, why do the ones who stay stay?
Mm-hmm.
And then they went to churches around North America. It might have been Europe as well. I'm not sure, but definitely North America. They visited churches that had a high youth retention rate, and they interviewed all those churches. What are you doing that your young people, they're not just sitting on a pew, they're leading, they're engaged, they're passionate, right? They're on fire. Like, what are you doing different? And so rather than asking why are they leaving, they asked why are they staying? And then they
Mm.
found all of those churches, there were common things that all, regardless of denomination, regardless of budget, regardless of culture, all those churches were doing something similar. There was, I think, 7 things that they were all doing, and we'll talk about that in a future episode. And so it shows that we can do this, man. We can do this. You can
Mm-hmm.
make the
Mm-hmm.
shift in your local church and start seeing an impact within the next decade, within the next 2 decades, with the next generation. And I think it's up to us, man. It's up to us. Don't wait for your conference president, man. You know what? Your conference president just finished answering his 200th email and his 700th phone call. Okay, like, leave the guy alone. You got to do this, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I wanted to read one more quote here before we wrap this one up. And this, where does this one come from? Trying to see here. And by the way, all these quotes are in the ebook that I told you guys to download at
Yeah.
thestorychurchproject.com. So make sure you go download it. Um, this is from Greg Stier as well, and I suppose this is from his from the book, same book that I was quoting earlier. And this is what he said in 2018. Pine Tops Foundation released a research project called The Great Opportunity. In their findings, researchers were alarmed at the loss of Christian teenagers from churches. They projected in what they call the base case scenario that by the year 2050, 35 million youth raised in Christian homes will disaffiliate from Christianity, which is over 1 million young people per year.
Mm.
In the Great Opportunity's worst case scenario, that number balloons to 42 million youth disaffiliation from their Christian faith. In other words, this is what he says. In the next 30 years, more than 1 million youth per year will forsake the faith that they were raised with. This goes beyond teenagers leaving their churches. We're talking about a generation that has forsaken Christianity. Whole generation. That's intense, man. Like,
Yeah.
we're talking like serious stuff. Now, if you add this to the fact, as I said at the beginning of our episode, that there is also an increasing trend of young people who are leaving church but not Christianity. So you've
Mm.
got this projected, like, we're going to be losing 1 million young people who are walking away from faith. And then the ones who are hanging on to faith, they're hanging on to faith, but they're leaving too. Who are you left with? you know, like, who are you left with to pass the baton to
Mm-hmm.
to lead the kingdom to his next chapter? Um, and yeah, some people will sit back and be like, "Oh, God will fix it. It's His church," but God doesn't babysit us. He's left the administration of the church in our hands. We are responsible. And I believe someday we'll stand before him and we'll have to answer for what we did with our resources, what we did with our time, and what we did with the information that we had available to us to make a positive difference. And I don't want to be the one who's standing there saying, I didn't do nothing. You know, I just figured you would fix it, you know, like, and I'm not trying to paint that in a legalistic way, but like, I would love to stand before God and say, look, man, it was tough, but I did everything I could with what I had. I know I didn't have the answers, but I did what I could with what I had. And I think that's what we should all aim for. So anyways, I wasn't trying to preach a sermon there, bro, but
No, that's good, bro.
yeah, that's the last quote I'm going to read. That's the last one.
It's let me add to that, bro. The statistic that I had here from actually they told us this in class. It's a Barna stat about pastors because, and I think it goes great with what you just said. Who we passing the baton to, right? And so because there's not a lot of youth and a lot of young people in the church, that bleeds or that results in there not being a lot of young leaders, even young pastors. This pastors is already something that it's not, you know, it's not like a job that is full with people and everyone just goes like, yeah, I just want to be a pastor. Maybe at one point it was. Now it's, you're not. So there's a stat that says that, and this is a Adventist stat. I need to find it though, but it's just that there's not enough people graduating, young pastors graduating to fill the slot in comparison to the ones that are retiring. There's way more.
Right. I read that
pastors
too.
retiring.
I read that recently. I don't know if it was Adventist Review or not, but I know what stat you're talking about.
And bro, and trust me, it's all over because I know unions here, unions there are trying to do everything possible. They're putting in millions of dollars. They're even trying to give full rides in some cases to young people for the BA. I wish that would have came back in our days, but that's fine. What I'm saying is that that's the need, right? Because there's not enough graduating. But not only that, it says one of the more alarming findings, and this is from Barna 2021-2022 study, Pastoral Burnout. The more alarming finding is that 46% of pastors under the age of 45, that might include us, okay, I'd say that are considering quitting full-time ministry compared to 34% of pastors 45 and older. So, like you said, it's not only causing an issue for the ones that are leaving, it's also causing an issue for the ones, and this is pastoral, right? But let me make that distinction. What about youth who are already inside the church? And they're also, like you said, they're going to be saying, you know what? Because if you have pastors thinking of leaving full-time ministry, not necessarily leaving the church, right? But leaving full-time ministry. All this, the point is that this is a huge issue. This is not just you know, like you said, it's not a cut. It's an artery. To the point that it's affecting the leadership of the church, and now people are conferences, administration are struggling to figure out what are they going to do in order to have just a basic amount of pastors. And I know that's not the issue, pastors, but the issue is young people, bro. It's, I mean, bro, I was called, I graduated at 21. I started ministry at 2021 when I graduated. And I remember, at least in Mexico, bro, there was a lot of us. It was like 50 graduating, and probably like still in South American countries, because we did make that distinction, right? In other countries, these stats maybe don't apply, but we're talking about like here in the more northern, western, secular part. It's, bro, you get like 2 or 3 graduates in like PUC, 3, 4, 5, if not less. So it's an issue, man. And I'm looking forward to keep having these conversations. Like you said, we need to allow the Holy Spirit. I mean, we have what we need. Yes, it is God's church. Yes, we can find the solution because we literally got the Holy Spirit. Like, it's literally God's presence with us, guiding us. The question is, are we listening to him, or are we just trying to continue to do our own thing based on what we want?
Yeah, absolutely,
yeah,
bro. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And look, I fall under that statistic. I was a pastor for 9 years, full-time as an employee, and then decided to resign. I didn't resign from full-time ministry because I didn't want to be in ministry anymore. I resigned from full-time employment because I wanted to do more ministry.
Mm.
There's something in the system, and I don't mean this toward any particular leader, because I get along really well to this day with the conference leaders here in my city. We still work really well together. I'm still a volunteer pastor at the local church. I talk to them. We have a good collaborative relationship. So it's not about that, but there's something in the system that is really, really difficult for young people who are creative, who are energetic, who have a lot to offer, who know their worth. And that's something about this new generation, is they know their worth, right? Young people today know that the talents that they have, if they bring it into the corporate world, they would be welcomed. They would be celebrated. They would have an impact,
Preach.
and they bring those talents into the church, and they're criticized and derided, not just once or twice, but over and over and over and over again. And I'm not necessarily talking about the local conference, although there are some conferences that are toxic. I'm referring mostly, though, to just the local churches, man. You walk in there with all the expectation and energy in the world because you want to change the community, you want to transform the city for Christ. Bro, you can't even change the bulletin. Any little thing you bring up is like war, and so these young people are like, why am I going to put up with this? I could still build the kingdom while doing something else for a living where I'm actually valued. And that's a big part of my story. Not that I didn't feel valued, but that for me, it was more like I couldn't get out of this vortex of always being around Adventists and at Adventist events. And, I had to do this and I had to do that. And, there's all these requirements when you're an employee, there's not enough room, or there's not enough pastors. So the pastors that are there end up getting stretched a bit thin. And even then I wasn't stretched as thin as some of the other guys, but even then it was so hard to engage in actual mission to secular people, because I was just always busy doing something churchy. And I was just like, dude, I could build the kingdom easier if I'm not a church employee, man. Like, this is, because as a church employee, what you find is you end up in districts where you're constantly putting out fires, you're constantly dealing with toxic people. And then sometimes there's policies within this conference structure as well that restrain you. That there's so much there, there's so much there. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is because change requires systemic overhauls, right? True change requires systemic overhauls. It's not change if all you're doing is saying, oh, we love you, we welcome you, we want you here, we value you. But you're not willing to change the systemic structures that are making young people walk away. That's not actual change. And that's something that I found in lots of local churches that I worked in over the years, is that they want a different outcome, but they want to keep the same things that lead to the bad outcome.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like, oh, we don't like this outcome. We want our young people to stay. Well, this is why they're leaving, though. You need to change this. No. We don't want to change that. We just want the young people to stay. Well, you can't have a different outcome unless you're willing to change the cause, right? It's cause and effect. You know what I mean? Like, if you have an effect and you want it to change, you got to change the cause, and the effect changes by itself, as soon as you change the cause. And so there's a lot of that, because, like, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the future episodes, but that mentality of, oh, we want young people to stay, but we want them to stay on our terms. It's like, that's not how anything works. Now, of course, I'm not advocating that we change anything that's biblical.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Most of the stuff that we end
although trolls are going to troll, bro, but
most of the stuff that pushes our young people away ain't even Bible, bro. It's just personal opinions and all kinds of stuff. So anyways, I don't want to go into future episodes now. I think we've talked quite a bit, and I think we've laid a foundation for what we're actually talking about when we talk about youth ministry, youth retention, what we're actually dealing with in the modern day. And yeah, I just want to encourage everyone who's listening. We're going to explore this some more over the coming episodes. Definitely download that ebook. Check out the resources that are there, because we want to impact your local church for the kingdom and for young people. We want to empower you and resource you and equip you and inspire you to be the change in your local church. We're not here trying to change conferences. We ain't that smart, but your local church is where it's at. And that's what we want to impact. So anyway, those are my closing thoughts, bro.
Yeah, bro. I'm agree. I think we'll leave it at there. I'm looking forward to the next episodes that we have. Encourage everyone to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, let us know. I mean, comment also. Comment about these things in the comments below. We're gonna link the book. I think it's extremely good. There are other resources that I think we can, as time goes by, we could also let them know. But yeah, man. I'm yes, it's unfortunate. And yes, it is sad. It's important to see this, but this gives us the ability to say, okay, then God, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. But the answer is, okay, God, tell me what to do. The answer is not, okay, let me try something else, or let's jump on this trend, or well, you know what, I think, or this is what we used to do. Well, this is coming to my mind, bro. But just a lot of the church leadership is based off of nostalgia because we're very emotional beings. So those who are leading, who are maybe older, are a lot of times I see this are leading based off of the how they felt when they were young, or how they felt, or the things that they thought are correct, and they get that nostalgic feeling, but they're missing out on, like you said, listening to the story of the youth today, listening to what they're going through. When it comes to like Pathfinder stuff or other things, like, oh, let's do this. In my day, we used to do this. In my day, it used to be like this, and it worked. And it's like, but let's listen to what the youth are doing now. Let's listen to what God wants, and then let's see how we can listen to the youth to move forward. So yeah, bro, guys, like, subscribe, share, and yeah, man, that's my final thoughts.
That's awesome, bro. All right, guys, we'll catch you next week. Until then, let's be the change.